Alrighty, we're back. TideTalks is back.
Yeah.
This is the first one of the semester, and just a little bit about this, what this is. So this is TideTalks, marine science speaker series that Olivia and I started last year. And a little bit of inspiration for it is that we modeled this off of TED Talks. And the reason we started this was we had buddies, like some of you here, that would come up to us and say how excited they were to, about the ocean, and that they were jealous that we were learning about, sharks, whales, and dolphins in our classes, but they didn't fit into the schedule. They were doing bio, but they were doing content. So what we wanted to do is grab a little bit of a sliver of all the excitement that we're doing in our major and bring that here. Additionally, we also have brilliant faculty in the program that is doing super cool research that is underappreciated and does not get these minutes. So what we do is, we've been meeting once a week to try to get this together. So each month, we're gonna try to bring in a great speaker, talk on some really cool research that they're doing. We're gonna have some fun themed snacks. It should be kind of a fun, low-key environment. He's gonna give it 20 to 30 minutes each. We're gonna have a Q&A afterwards, really interactive. Feel free to ask any questions you want. Any question. And just sit back, relax. Don't feel like you need to take notes. This should be just a fun, Tuesday night, Tuesday evening, where you learn something new and brag something that you learned about today. So I'll pass it off to Olivia.
Yeah. So it's also really great timing for us to have TideTalks going on right now, because on October 20th, which is in just a little over a week from now, we have the Marine Scholars applications due. If anyone wants to be Marine Scholars, Danny and I are Richard Carson Scholars. Jason, Dr. Somarelli, is the head of the Marine Scholars of Medicine. And then there's also the Marine Roger Scholars that are focusing on the intersection between engineering and computer science and environmental science. There's also a brand new scholar program called the Climate Scholars that also has an application due on 20th. So yeah, this is a great time. Please, if you hear anyone saying like they're really passionate about this, let them know about the application. There's flyers outside, and let's get started.
Also, quick thanks to Aaron Boyd for putting up with us every week and helping plan this. It's not
So much you understand that we can start your office.
Is that like a reward for her to do this in kinetic sand? Or is it just a
She has tons of kinetic sand in her office. If you're ever like a lot of student boys,
I probably should
huge.
come to your office once in a while.
Mhm.
Well,
There we got Jason Somarelli.
it's like the best reception I've ever gotten from anywhere. So I do just want, at the risk of like being savvy, it's super inspiring that people like Danny, Olivia, and all of you who are sitting here want to like build the community that you want, right? Like you saw a gap in something and you said, we want to do this, and you went out and did it. The community is not always there. The things that you want in a community are not always there. And so if you see it missing, you go out and build it, which is cool. Anyway, I wanted to start with that, and then we can talk about science. So yeah, as Danny and Olivia said, like you can and should just throw questions at me, and it should just be like a chill thing. So just be like, hey, you said whatever, but I don't believe it. It's fun. Go ahead and do that. So I really wanted to push on some things today or tonight, whatever it is, about how science and marine science and environmental science can inform human health and vice versa. Like the terrible kind of things that we can do to the environment sometimes impact our health, and talk to you about some of the work that's happening in my lab, learning from whales. We have some Bass Connection teams that are working on this too. So if you're like interested in Bass Connections, you can just contact me and get with one of these folks and get my contact info. Okay, so I always like to start with a little outline. You can follow along in the outline, like where we are, chapter one. We'll be in chapter 2, and then we'll go to chapter 3. But I'm going to talk to you about oxygen for a little while, like what I know about oxygen and the role of oxygen in your health and homeostasis, just maintaining balance in your body and in disease. I'm going to talk to you about just really quickly, like some work that we've published, so you can go and read that work, and I've made it like a short part of this. And that the goal there is, like, we know marine mammals, for example, have adapted to living in the water. And that part of that is them diving and holding their breath for, like, I don't know, 99.5% of their life is like not at the surface. And 99.99999% of our lives, unless you're like a free diver somewhere, is at the surface. So they've adapted these organ and body system changes. But how did we get a genetic change that gave us a body system change? How do we get a gene expression change that gave us a body system change? So that work kind of links gene expression to physiology. And if I'm being too detailed on molecular biology at any point, be like, I'm an econ major, so like tell me what the hell a gene is, and I can do that. Yeah, econ. Yeah, come on, it's okay. If you don't get it, tell me, and it's my fault that I'm not explaining myself. And then I want to talk to you about like some cell culture methods. These are like taking cells from the whales and growing them as like avatars of a whale in the lab, which is super. And how that allows us to study really deeply what's happening in the whales at the cellular level. So this is oxygen. People meet oxygen. Oxygen meet people. You use this thing all the time, and we don't think about it, right? But you think about it when you don't have it. And oxygen, the amount of oxygen that we're used to having in our environment is a really new thing relative to life on Earth. So about 4 and some, this is like a number that slides back here and back up here. I don't really know when. I don't think anybody actually knows the date that life originated on Earth, but it was sometime some billions of years ago. But a lot of that time went almost a billion years before photosynthesis was evolved, right? It became evolved. And then like a whole crap ton of time it took for enough oxygen to be around that it's at the level we experience it on Earth now. And so that's a really short window, like that window in red. And that's how long the amount of oxygen we experience now has existed on Earth. And so, as I said, you don't really notice oxygen is around you until you're somewhere where you don't have it. And then you really quickly realize, uh-oh, there's something missing in my life. And that something is oxygen. You kind of need it. So like, go up to the Himalayas, go down to, I don't know, the Mariana Trench or whatever, right? Or go with Danny and his buddies and like just go sprint as fast as you can around a circle like crazy people for a little while. Nobody in their right mind would choose to do this as a sport or a profession or anything. Go do that and then feel the lack of oxygen in your body, pass out, and then come to and realize, oh, maybe I should take long, deep, calming breaths and appreciate this thing that I have. And this really is a problem clinically. So like I'm in the Department of Medicine, even though I'm a PhD. So I have to deal with these. This is being recorded. I have to deal with these physicians sometimes, and they tell me that things that I'm studying matter for our health, and they're right. So, so like if you go with 6 to 8% of oxygen for even a few minutes, it's fatal. So I'll start there. But then even at like not what I would consider like not that low an amount of oxygen in the air that you're breathing, you really have impaired like coordination. If you've ever gone to Colorado, like, you experience this, like, I'm looping, like I tried to jog. I'm not doing what these goofballs are doing. I like tried to just saunter up the hill in Colorado to like a restroom or something. I was like, I was out. That was it. It was over for me. So this is a problem. And this happens during surgery. So about 1 in 15 patients with like a surgical procedure where they have to be anesthetized experience like this low oxygen in their blood. About the same number around that, about a 1 in 64 experience it for 5 minutes during their surgery. And then about 1 in 20 people who will have long surgeries, like these are multi-hour surgical procedures, experience damage to their organs that's long-term from low oxygen. And we're bad at tolerating. Does anybody know Emma?
Yes.
Yeah, some people might know Emma. She was a student in our comparative phys class. Well, oh no.
She said you do.
Emma, I'm sorry. No, in theory, she gave me permission to share this at one point. But there's a scholar, Abby Milwick. She's on her way to med school. Divya's behind. She's on her way to med school. And Emma is here with us, working, doing some really cool outreach stuff with us. So anyway, this is Emma in our comparative physiology class, like dunking her head underwater, holding her breath. And nobody talked like over a minute and like 5 or something, a minute and 10. So we're adapted very poorly for low oxygen. But these lovely, wonderful creatures are really well adapted. Beaked whales, so goose-beaked whales are like the champion diver. They can dive for hours, 2 hours or more at depths like 7 Empire State Buildings down. They spend like little bits of time just taking a breath, and then they basically are just underwater all the time. So there's got to be something we can learn from these animals about how to adapt ourselves to low oxygen conditions. So that got me really interested, and because my wife happens to be a marine biologist, I would drive to the coast on the weekends and like spend time with her friends, mostly partying at that moment in time, and going to parties and social things and like talking to them about this phenomenon and realizing that, like, wait a minute, I study a process where low oxygen is really critical too. And I have to tell you, if anybody's really sensitive to like biochemistry, just like shield your eyes. I'm going to show you a little bit of biochem. Just say, yeah, thank you. That was really kind. That was really nice of you. There are ways that oxygen is important for our body. And one of the ways is it's required for our metabolism. So there are oxygen independent ways we metabolize things, and those are really inefficient processes like glycolysis. But there are these oxygen dependent processes, and so that's how we basically get all of our energy through using oxygen as an electron receptor. And the process that I study is cancer. So most of the time, my lab is studying cancer. So cancer is a process where you have many times this multicellular organ-like thing growing inside your body, inside one's body, and the amount of blood supplied to that varies depending on where the blood vessels are. And the areas that are in poor supply either die or become hypoxic, meaning they have low oxygen. Now, that wouldn't matter to anybody, except those low oxygen environments are the thing that cause resistance to therapy. So we give chemo, and we see that some cells will die in the face of chemo, and many cells will not, and we don't know why. And one of the reasons why is because those areas are lacking in oxygen. And through evolution, we've adapted, for better or for worse, this ability to respond to low oxygen by moving. So you can imagine if we were like single cell modal things floating around, right? We're not tissues or organs. or just a single cell, and we encounter low oxygen, the only thing we can do, the only things are die. We don't want to do that, but that's an option. Change your, it always is. You can change your metabolism, right? You can just stop metabolizing, or you can move to an area that's more rich in oxygen. And so we've adapted this ability to sense oxygen loss or deprivation and move, and cancer cells do that. They've sort of taken advantage of this evolutionary link between low oxygen and needing to get out of there. And so when you have a low oxygen environment in a tumor, those cells can turn on genes, but they can turn on genes and processes that make them migrate and move out of the way and go to another place. So now they're more drug resistant and they're more migratory, so they can go to another place and metastasize. And those two things, drug resistance and metastasis, are what kill most patients with solid tumors, almost all of them. So this tumor hypoxia is really relevant to me, and I think whales can teach me a lot about that process and how to fight it. But it's also important to you marine science aficionados, because as climate changes, as nutrients dump into especially coastal areas, the ocean is becoming more anoxic, lower oxygen in the ocean. And so this is a problem that we need to think about and learn from nature solutions to better fight this sort of issue, or better accommodate this, as species will have to adapt to these areas of low oxygen. You can see anything in blue is an area where the amount of oxygen has decreased over time since about 2018 when this paper was published. And this one is relevant. So COVID is still around, whether we want it to be or not. And patients with COVID suffer hypoxia because their infection is sort of shutting down and killing off their lung cells. They're getting a lot of inflammation, and they're not able to take oxygen in. And this is a major cause of death from COVID as well. So, okay. All of that to say, studying marine mammals, I think, can tell us about hypoxia. And we know a lot of the physiologic changes, like we know things change in aquatic mammals, like their blood volume changes, their myoglobin and hemoglobin changes. They have all these physiologic changes, like these body system changes. That's what I mean by physiologic. But we really don't know like what their cellular adaptations are. Like we know what the animal does, kind of, but we don't know a lot about what the cellular changes are. So I really wanted to set out to understanding cellular adaptation. And this is Ashley, former Rachel Carson scholar, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. Ashley's a postdoc at Stanford now, did her PhD here. And what she did was, she did a study where she took dolphins. They do these breath holds. They can flip over and just put their blowhole under the water, and it's trained. It's a trained behavior. And then we're able to collect blood from their fluke and from the tail fluke. And so we can get blood samples, and we can isolate the RNA. So we can look at the genes that are turning on and off in these animals and see when dolphins are holding their breath, what happens. And what we found was a gene called ALOX5. And I was like, good for that. I have no idea what ALOX5 is. I literally had no clue. Like sometimes you get these things and you're like, I don't know, what is that? So Google told me, it's pretty bad some days, that ALOX5 is an enzyme that makes this thing called a leukotriene. And then Google told me that, you see how science works. It's very cutting edge. Google told me that leukotrienes induce vasoconstriction. That's cool, because we know that when you dive, you have to restrict your blood supply to like these areas where you don't really care, and put it in the good spots. the heart, the lungs, and the head. And we're like, holy, my kids are watching. Wow, what a better thing than an expletive. But some expletive that, like this gene we found, makes an enzyme, or is an enzyme that makes a metabolite that might be involved in vasoconstriction. And that was really interesting. So these bar graphs are just like different dolphins over the course of their different breath holds. And this is the lipoxygenase, the ALOX5 activity. So this is measuring the amount of activity. And all of these dolphins are doing the same thing. So we went back the next year and did this study. So we found this in 1 year with one process or one analysis type, and then we went back and we used a different analysis measuring enzymatic activity, and we found the same thing is happening. This is in their blood. So we think we kind of hit on like a gene that's connecting to a physiologic process of vasoconstriction, like blood vessel constriction. Am I making, like, what's the scale of sense I'm making on a 1 to 10? 10 is like, yeah, all right, I'm with you, you know, okay. And 1 is like, yeah, I don't know where I am. I'm in the wrong building. I didn't know this tower existed or whatever. Okay, I see that it's mostly. So there's another cool bit of this that we haven't published on, but we're able to use comp bio stuff to kind of go back and look at gene copies of these proteins. And so what we saw was like mammals are the ones that have the genes in this ALOX family. So everything else like fish and other things didn't really have as many of these genes as mammals do. But then we can see, and I don't know if you're able to appreciate this, like these two animals, these two rodents, have increased copies of almost every one of these genes. They're a little darker, like there's a little darker yellow. This one, like they have a lot of copies of that, a lot of copies of that gene. And we were like, well, what are these two things? And they're ugly little things. Well, this one's cute. That one's kind of ugly. But I think they're both adorable. But what's cool is these are burrowing rodents that live in chronic low oxygen. So we think that dolphins turn on this gene and turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, because they died, right? These little buggers sit in low oxygen all the time. So what they had to adapt is like, we need multiple genes of this family all the time because we're always in low oxygen. We're not like going out and getting a breath and coming in. We're always there. So they did it a different way, but they may have done the same kind of thing. Okay, so I'm just going to stop there. This is a weird thing to say as a summary in most scientific talks. However, like we didn't know that we could take blood from dolphins and use like the same techniques we use in like human health type things in dolphins. So like the fact that we can do this type of study in a marine mammal is like kind of first. First in a group of a few of us in the world. We identified this thing that we think is linked to breath holding. It has known functions in vasoconstriction, so that was kind of cool. And then we're starting to think about like can we start to overlay like breath hold, heart rate, and things like this over the gene expression changes, so we can like look at the heart rate going down and when the gene expression would come up in relation to that. Okay, I'm gonna time out there. Does anybody have like? You're supposed to ask instead of not. Does anybody have a question? Megan, if she's still listening. What questions do you have? That's the way you're supposed to put it. Yes.
When you said that the cetaceans going on the back and the whales going on the back, that's a trained behavior like by humans.
Yeah, it's at Dolphin Quest in Oahu. So we'll go down there. There's Ashley's down there now. Yeah. Like tomorrow morning I will receive a package of dolphin, which is very obvious. But yeah.
When you say that they use vasoconstriction to keep like oxygenated blood in the heart and brain, wouldn't that impact the ability to swim? Like deaths and things like that?
I asked the physiologist the same thing, but apparently like they have alterations, and I don't remember exactly how they've done this, but they have alterations in their muscle as well, so that they can shunt blood to their muscle but not like they don't need to put it in their skin. It's not that they don't have any blood, it's just that like 90%, whatever, some higher percent of the blood is going to the spots where it needs to be saturated. I think they have other things happening too with hemoglobin, like they're letting go of oxygen faster. So like there's all kinds of cool like sports phys relevant things too that happen, which is like weird to think about. But yeah, it's a great question. I have the same question. I don't really know the answer. Yeah.
I just thought this when you were sending them, I just like not on the hemoglobin. But have you guys measured the acidity of the blood rather than see if that changes?
Not directly, but anecdotally, the color changes. And so like there's like a really old paper, like, I don't know, older than me paper that is, that they do that. They like, well, I forget how they did it, but like they can measure the amount of oxygen sat and the amount of like lactic acid based on like the color. And we noticed that, we're like, why is that? And I kind of Google again. I kind of looked at it and it was because we think that's what it is. So we haven't done that, but it'd be really cool to do. Anyone? Yeah, Dan.
So with like not comparing back to humans, with either like breath holding or higher athletes, can you train possible genes that you can work on expressing towards and helping your breath holding for people that are going for these pretty bad championships?
Yeah, so the easiest, I don't know that you can train gene like you probably do that. Like you do that in training. What we've thought about is like, are there druggable targets here where you can turn on a gene that we know is important, or you can remove a gene that we know they've lost? And we found a couple. And ALOX5 is actually, there's an FDA approved monoclonal antibody against ALOX5 for asthma, which is interesting because it's like a breathing like deficiency issue. So anyway, yeah, it's a great question. Lots more to do. Okay, I know I'm kind of over time, so I'll just keep. Should I keep rolling or should I stop? I can stop now.
We have our names on that. I will let you guys.
All right, that's fine with me. Okay, so this other piece is work that Jillian is sort of working on now, and it really is about the cells and how the cells have adapted. So the ability to do this, like what we felt like we needed was like a lab model of breath holding or a lab model of hypoxia. And we have in the lab a hypoxia chamber, like incubator. Put cells in the incubator and make them be in low oxygen conditions. And you can put them in like the normal incubator and they have normal oxygen conditions and you can compare them. But you can't take a beaked whale from Mayo and like drive it to Durham. I mean, maybe you could, but you would get in all kinds of trouble with permits and stuff. So you can't do this on the scale that we wanted to do it, like with these experiments in the lab. But what you can do is you can take biopsy. So we were able to take work with folks at the Marine Lab, and really none of this, I should say, like none of this gets done if folks at the Marine Lab like are not able to do this really sophisticated biopsying of whale skin. You could take these little biopsies. I don't know, this is like the biggest one I've ever seen. Like they're teeny tiny. And you can imagine like this little well, it's like this little bitty thing. And at the bottom of it, you can put the skin biopsy in some liquid. And that liquid just it's like it's blood kind of. It just has all the nutrients it needs. And you can grow it there. And you can watch the cells sort of grow out and propagate these cells from biopsy. And so we did this, like this is some picture of like the tissue. These are all cells from the whale that we put in the culture dish. But by day about 2 or 3, you start to see these things growing out, right? That oh wow, there's like cells growing out. And then by like a week or 2, you get all of these cells all around this piece of tissue. These skin fibroblasts, we all have fibroblasts in our skin. These skin fibroblasts, the connective part of our skin, just grow. And we've adapted these sort of methods to do this for whales. And so now we have this ability, like we don't need to put whales in a big truck and like drive them to Durham and study them. We can put them little micro whale cultures of cells in a dish, in a little bitty dish. We can do something to them, like treat them with drugs or things we think are interesting. We can expose them to normal oxygen and hypoxia, low oxygen. We can collect their RNA, their protein, their DNA, whatever, and do whatever analysis we want. So I'm sorry about the biochemistry pictures, but what we did was we took human cells as a comparison, and we took a whole bunch of whale and dolphin cells, and we said, what are the differences in their response to low oxygen? And one of the things that human cells do is they turn on all these genes. So red just means on. So if it's a gene with any pink or red that's not white or blue, it means it's on. So they turn on all these genes related to glycolysis. So it makes sense because like they don't have any oxygen. So they go, oh, I don't have any oxygen. I need to turn on the glycolysis pathway. That's what they do. Human cells do that. We've known it for years and years and years. There's a Nobel Prize on this. Like it's over. Everybody go home about the glycolysis stuff. But whales and dolphins don't really do that. They kind of do it a little bit. So like all the white here are all genes where they didn't turn it on when humans did. So while humans have this like really strong push to turn on glycolysis, whales and dolphins kind of go, maybe we'll turn on a little bit of glycolysis, but not too much. So that kind of pointed us to like, oh, maybe there's a mitochondrial difference or like a metabolic difference. Maybe like some part of this part of the process is different. So this is sort of technical, but I'm going to blast through this part and just tell you that the ability of a cell to respire, like to produce ATP or consume oxygen, is measured here. And you can't see the human change because the whales are so much better at it. So if I like change the scale of the axis over here, you would see that humans do it a little bit, but whales do it so much better. And what I think is kind of cool about this is like, if you look at the diving ability, humans would be at the bottom, dolphins would be next, pilot whales would be next, and then beaked whales would be after them. And their ability to respire is sort of correlated with their diving ability. So if they're worse at it, they don't have as much respiration. If they're better at it, they have way more respiration. And this is more than sort of we've ever seen. Sort of like, oh, it's in their mitochondria. It's like this stuff over here that's happening. It's not that they undergo glycolysis like humans do. They've done something where they have changed their mitochondrial abilities somehow. And so one thing that would do that, Google tells me that the way that you can do that is just have more mitochondria. So if you have like better respiratory capacity, you'll have more mitochondria and they'll be more linked together. The people who run around in a circle a lot may have adapted, like train themselves to have more mitochondria in themselves. I don't know who those people are. I assume it's some of you people. So this is a human cell. It's really pretty. And the green stuff is actin. And there should be some red stuff. So actin is just like a marker. But don't worry about it. But there should be red stuff. And there is, but you just can't see because the lights. But now, hopefully, you will appreciate that there's a lot of red stuff in that one. And if there were no lights on, you could see there's a ton of red stuff. And I would, if I wasn't on Zoom, I'd like take this out, just turn the screen. Can't even access my brightness. But you can probably, I can see from here that you can see more red stuff. There is just like wait, my kids are up. There's like a lot ton of, you know what I was gonna say. There's like a metric boatload of mitochondria in these whale cells. And here's like maybe a better depiction of it. Human, whales, and this is just like quantified over here, human and whales. So we think that the way they can dive is by whenever an oxygen molecule comes in, they can use it and they can use it really effectively. We kind of like don't really know that the oxygen's there. We're kind of bad at, oh, there's oxygen. I didn't know. I was doing glycolysis. I wasn't paying attention. You know, you had that person in class. You know, it was that person. You know, we're that person. Humans are that person in class. You know, like, oh, was there a test? Okay, that's that. So one way you get this increased mitochondrial volume is you have PGC1 alpha, this other gene that comes up, and that indeed is what happens. So again, we see humans, when we expose human cells to hypoxia, their PGC1 alpha, their gene that makes more mitochondria doesn't change, but all of the genes that, all of the whale cells make this higher amount of this gene that makes mitochondria. So, okay, I kind of flew through that, but we think that like the ability to dive is a cellular adaptation. I think that's different from what most everybody has sort of claimed, which is like, it's all in the physiology. It's all like they can vasoconstrict better and blah, 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 but you have to express genes to be able to vasoconstrict. And you have to like have differences in your gene expression and your mitochondria to be able to respire differently. There needs to be some genetic and gene expression underpinning for that adaptation. We found some drivers of this process. And then now we have some, we got a grant with some of the Marine Lab folks to think about how this might impact like responses to stress. So there might be like a conservation approach here where we can think about how these animals might be changing their ability to dive and their oxygen utilization when they're freaked out because of all the noise from boat traffic and all these other things. And then I think I've touched on like what we think it can teach us about these two things, but I always kind of like to end with this point because it never was obvious to me until recently that one of the strengths of giving weight about the human health impacts of studying environmental relevant things like marine mammals is that people are not always going to agree with you that it's important to conserve and preserve anything. Like, I think probably you would talk to like-minded people many times in your life around here, and everybody's like, yeah, of course, like we should do that. Like we should save the sea turtles or whatever horse. Whatever, I swear a lot, so I have to moderate myself. I'm on YouTube, so I have to stop.
The children have gone to bed.
Oh, yes. All right, so I'm still not gonna do it because of YouTube. But at least I feel a little safer. But like whatever thing you feel is important, we all probably value the intrinsic like value of that, right? That it should just be conserved and preserved because a natural thing should be. But there are many people who just would like mow down whatever thing and who cares and build like pave it or build a Vegas. I'm just saying. And like that isn't always the person you're going to talk to is like that like-minded person. So if you can demonstrate some value to them, I think this kind of approach is just an example of how to try to demonstrate value to people when they're not always going to think like you. And I think that's a good approach with people who don't think like you, is to think about what's important to them and try to meet them there, rather than convince them that you're right. I think I'll just stop there and say thank you to all the people, and probably a bunch of people I missed here, but that have done this work or been part of it, and funding. And thanks for your attention. This was fun. What questions do you have? Yeah.
Is there a project that like the next thing that you're looking at, or like where is this going as of now?
Micro whales. So like we want to take fibroblasts, and you can reprogram fibroblasts into stem cells. Nobel Prize for that, the Yamanaka factors. So it's technically pretty simple, but then once they're stem cells, you can turn them into things like heart cells or whatever you want. And then if you take a bunch of cell types that make up an organ, you can mix them together. And you know what happens? They self-assemble into the organ in a dish, like in micro scale. So what we want to do is make micro hearts and micro lungs and eventually we want to have like micro whales and little whales, like petting them and eating them grapes. I think my micro whales are going to want to eat grapes naturally, but so yeah, that's kind of what's on the horizon, because fibroblasts are not all that relevant physiologically. Like the skin's not the first responder to low oxygen, but hearts are, you know, and clinically important. So great question.
Todd, you can take skin cells and turn them into stem cells?
And then into whatever you want. It's so cool.
That's wild.
It's wild. Yeah. That was the Nobel Prize in some year, I don't know, many years ago. Yamanaka, the Japanese researcher, four genes do this together, you know, put them together and they do it. Yeah.
So the gene that was responsible for the increased mitochondrial collection was present in humans, just not during ejaculation.
Yeah, and it's funny because other data sets it will go up, but in our data set it doesn't really do anything, kind of just hovers around unchanged. But the whale cells it goes up. So I think it is tied to hypoxia and like other studies, but just we haven't seen that in our own studies. So it's there and it does the same stuff. It's just I think they might be more like whales might be more sensitive to turning it on quicker or in a different way. So yeah, we're actually really all similar to a lot of animals. Like genetically, like I think we share almost all the same genes. There's maybe 20 genes different or 30 genes different from whales. It's not a lot. Protein. What other questions? Yeah.
So for the graphic that you had up that showed like actually how far down whale and sperm whales go down,
Yeah.
are there ever cases where other cetaceans go down that deep and their head go for everything and they miscalculate how much air they have and they actually drown underwater?
I don't know about that. We could ask Jill and she would know. I don't know what I think happens there is like it's the same thing as like whales don't get cancer. It's like you don't know that. Like how many times have you been able to biopsy a whale or like do MRI on a whale? You know, like you just can't study it. So you don't, it's not that they don't get it, it's that you can't study it. So I think they wash up on the beach, you don't know why that is. You know, you do need like the vet will do a necropsy and you'll assess, but like there probably are cases where that happens. I know there's like, you know, bubbles that are generated that are like bad, like the bends, that kind of thing. So maybe if they get that, like they miscalculate, but I don't know. We'd have to ask like a person who knows things about that. I know so little. It's like it's bad. It's really like this is what science is. Like you go with this question and you're like, hey, I want to do this, and you start doing these things, and you're like, oh no, I'm out of my depth so quickly. You know, like I have no idea. Like, Google help me, you know, do it, figure out why this is happening. It's fun, but it's I'm always like, I don't know what's happening. What any other questions? Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate the time. Good night. Should I do something?
Nah, I am straight on my side. You're good.